29-19, your final from Las Vegas, with Nix improving his team to 7-5, 21 total touchdowns for the rookie quarterback, both the record and the touchdowns first amongst rookies this season. And for more on the action, let's take you out to Allegiant Stadium, where Trent Green, part of our NFL on CBS family, is standing by. Trent, always great to be with you here. And I want to tip my cap at Bo Nix, but I also want to examine some of the reasons why. And I want to start with the head coach. You see the emotion of Sean Payton as he comes off the field. What has he done to this point to put not just his quarterback, but this team in the best position possible?
Well, I think it's the confidence that this team is playing with. I think when you talk about Sean Payton, it's the experience that he's been with. He knows what it's like to have young developing quarterbacks. He knows what it's like to build a team, to have playoff success, to push things forward. He understands what happened a year ago. They were in a similar situation record-wise and didn't finish off the season very strong, ultimately missing out on the playoffs. So he's trying to keep the energy level high. He has a young quarterback that is learning every week. He hasn't thrown an interception the last 3 games. He's completing about 75-80% of his passes the last 3 games, and really that offense is playing well, and Cortland Sutton has been a big reason for it. So trying to find some balance, get the running game going, but also the defense coming up the way they did at the end of this game. The second half, the defense was outstanding.
You're taking me all the places I want to go here. Let's start with...
All right. Yeah, so let's talk about this. This game, let me see if I can get it where it has... There it is. Okay. This game was really good for multiple reasons that I think might get a little underlooked. And this is where you do actually have to kind of go through the stats a little bit. When you're a team like the Denver Broncos, especially with a, I'm going to call him a new hot shot rookie quarterback, although people are slow to understand that. We all know that we've kind of been on the Bo Nix bandwagon from the very beginning. But he's obviously, at this point now, top. He's the best rookie quarterback in the NFL right now. Whether you want to say he's going to continue to be that way, whether you say his career will be the best, doesn't even matter. Right now, clearly the best quarterback and the front runner for Rookie of the Year. But this wasn't even like his perfect game. He absolutely had some beautiful throws. I mean, that throw for his second touchdown, I think it was, for 18 yards. I mean, it was pure perfection in the corner of the end zone to Sutton. I mean, it was awesome. It was just such perfect placement. But he was 25 for 42, 273 yards, 6.5 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns, and a 94 rating. But what I love that he did was a handful of things. One was his decisiveness and his confidence. I mean, you could see. I mean, they were in their own red zone, right? In their own, I think it was like 14-yard line, maybe even deeper. And it was 3rd and 1, and he throws again another 19-yard strike. That continues to be the confidence and the collaboration between Sean Payton. I've said this a couple of weeks ago now, but there is no babying of Bo Nix whatsoever. This is putting the game on his shoulders. Big time moments on his shoulders. Because, I mean, even whoever was commentating was kind of like, that was, you don't see that often. It was 3rd and short. I mean, that is the confidence that this team has in Bo. And again, you see it. And then he called multiple timeouts in the 4th quarter. Multiple. And to see him do that with such conviction and understanding of the moment. Because again, I know the score is 29-19, but this is one of those games that many teams let slip away. We see this all the time, all around the league. I'm sure it's actually already happened today, But it's just one of those things that call the timeout, understand where you're at in the game, don't take a penalty, don't rush a play. Because we see this again, we see seasoned veterans either quickly try to rush a play and then something happens and just doesn't go well, or it's like a false start, right? Like we see that all the time. Or you take the 5-yard penalty, it's a mess. He called the timeout confidently, understood the moment, understood what the play clock was, then was even yelling at the refs. Like he has that confidence. He's not just kind of like a prisoner of the moment. Like he's actually an like taking part in it, right? He's not a non-playable character. Like he is there, and that's so important. I mean, that just shows Everyone tried to use all of his starts in college as a bad thing. I mean, like, that's what comes with that. The dude already feels like he belongs and knows he belongs. And it just jumps out of the screen. It really, really does for me. And again, some of those things can seem to be little, but they're really not. They're really not, because I see seasoned veterans, guys that have been in the league for 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 plus years. They do that. And you're just like, what is going on? Like, how is this happening? So to see him have that composure, I just think is really, really, really awesome. And I just don't want it to go understated, honestly. But here's where this game gets even more interesting. This is why football is so crazy, because I'm going to list a few stats out for you. And on one side, you could, if you didn't really watch the game, which I did, you could paint that and just say, you should have lost this game. This was a bad game. And on the other side, you can paint and say, this was great that you were able to find a way to win. And so it's like, well, what's the difference then, right? Why is this a difference maker? And I'll explain why when I go through it. They had less first downs, less total plays, less total yards, less passing, less rushing, and more penalties. The Broncos, okay? All negatives, absolutely positively all negatives, right? Less first downs, less total plays, less total yards, less total passing, less rushing, and more penalties. I mean, the only thing that they had more of was, penalties, which you don't want, obviously. But here's the thing. In the red zone, they were 2 for 4, so they converted 2 touchdowns in that regard. And then they had the Raiders were 1 for 5. And they had 0 turnovers, and the Raiders had 2 turnovers. So again, when you're talking about a team like the Broncos, when people think that a team like this is not that good, okay, which is obviously people are still trying to fight and grasp, because even when you're watching this broadcast, they said, oh, this is the surprise of the NFL, that the Broncos are, about to be 7-5. And I was like, yeah, surprise if you're not paying attention. But that's fine. We'll let that go. But when you have a team like this who's not supposed to be here, oftentimes it's like, well, they assume that the only way they win is either by like an outlier situation, an exceptionally bad game by the other team, or they play perfect ball. And you've seen this with backup quarterbacks or quarterbacks that look like they were going to be good only for not. You see them play like perfect games. Everything kind of goes their way, and that's why they're kind of winning. But we've now seen the Broncos win in many different ways. And we talk about that with all the great teams, right? You got to find different ways to win. You can't always win by blowing teams out. You can't always win close, ugly games. Like, you got to be able to win in so many different ways. And that's what the Broncos are doing now. They're adding to their toolbox of different ways of winning. They can be outgained. They can be outrun, right? They can have some penalties. Obviously, you don't want those things to happen. That goes without saying. But they were still able to buckle down when need be. When they're in the red zone, they were able to convert and get touchdowns. When the Raiders were in their red zone, they were able to stop them and hold them to field goals, right? They were able to stop them. And those things go a long way, and have no turnovers and force 2 turnovers from the Raiders. So again, and it's like, on one side, if the Broncos were maybe in a slightly different position, right? Maybe this was like 3 years into where they were as a team. Then you could maybe be like, hey, you know what? Like, you really got to clean this stuff up, because you do to a degree, obviously. But the fact that they were still able to win this game 29-19, like, that's the thing that's so fascinating to me. Because sometimes when you see stats like this, it'll be a game where it's like a 1-score game, like a 1-point game by a field goal. The Broncos win by kicking a field goal with the final 3 seconds left, right? One of those types of things. Then you're like, man, you kind of were fortunate to come away with that win, right? Like, the way how we look at this, it's like kind of like that. But that's what's so fascinating, because when you watch this game, despite being, pretty much outplayed, and I say that very loosely, I just mean statistically, when you watch this game, in no way did you feel that the Denver Broncos were outplayed. And that's what's fascinating. Because so often when you watch these games, you can feel it. You don't even have to look at the box score, and you can just feel, man, this other team looks better. I know my team that I'm rooting for is winning, but the other team is clearly playing better right now. And then when you look at the box score, oftentimes it's there. And usually the difference is kind of like a really bad fumble on their own, 5-yard line, which then led to an easy score, or like a huge punt return that gave the other team like easy field position. Usually that's kind of what happens. But you didn't necessarily see that in this situation. So to me, that's what's so fascinating. And so then I asked myself, well, why is that? Why did this team, again, actually watch the game? They weren't outplayed. I did not watch that game and say, oh man, the Broncos shouldn't have won that game. This was more about the Raiders losing it. And it's because of the confidence and the competence and the situational football that they were playing. They were converting when they needed to convert. They were scoring when they needed to score. They were getting the job done when they needed to get it done. It wasn't one of those just kind of lucky break things. And so again, I find that really, really crucial because they're going to need that. Because you know what? Things like that happen, especially in the playoffs. And that's what Tom Brady has talked about, and that's why people have been kind of even continuing to praise the Kansas City Chiefs and Mahomes this season, despite them putting up good numbers. And again, it's kind of a balance. Because there's absolutely times that you watch a team not put up good numbers and again, be outplayed by the other team. And you're like, yeah, that team won, but like they really shouldn't have. Like they really were lucky. Case in point, the Broncos versus the Chiefs, when the Broncos should have won that game. You don't come away with that and say, man, the Chiefs really outplayed the Broncos. Like you don't think that at all. And that's why I was telling Chiefs fans, like, don't celebrate that win. That is a bad win. You did not deserve to win. So it's interesting. That's why, nothing is ever just 100% one way or the other. It's so situational. It's so game to game. It's so team. It's also like, from team to team, like how are you evaluating the team? What are the expectations of this team? So I just think that because of all of these types of things that are happening game to game to game, watching the Broncos find different ways to win, even when things aren't going perfectly, still remain confident, still remain competent, still taking care of business when you need to take care of it. And it's just awesome. It's really, really impressive to see. And this has to be, they're 7-5, which puts them a top team in the NFL. And they just have to be one of the most under-discussed, most under-respected teams. I mean, seriously, people are going to go nuts and talk about the Kansas City Chiefs versus the Panthers game. And it was like, the Panthers are awful. The Panthers are absolutely awful. And they needed a last-second field goal to win that game. I mean, that is bad. That is truly bad. And yet here, the Broncos, I think, play, again, a more masterful game, quite frankly. And yet nobody will talk about them. And again, I get it. Kansas City Chiefs are the popular team. Obviously, Mahomes, Andy Reid, winning Super Bowls, Travis Kelce. Like, I do get it. But I just wish that games like this, unfortunately, because you're going to be like, well, the Raiders aren't a good team. And I agree with that, right? I'm not acting like the Raiders are this great team. But at least it's divisional, right? We know that. And it's one of those things, too, where rookie quarterback, this young team, like they're so overperforming what everybody thought they were going to be doing. And I just really think that they need to get more credit for what they're doing, what they're accomplishing, how they're accomplishing it. And I'm trying my best to make sure that it doesn't go understated. Because you could look at this game and say, 29-19. Bo Nix, 25 for 42, 273 yards, right? 7 attempts, 44 rushing. Right? You could just kind of go there, okay, 87 yards, 2 touchdowns, respectable. You can go through the list. I mean, look, even if you look at it, 25 for 42 was Bo Nix. Minshew was 25 for 42. Obviously, I know different yards and touchdowns and interceptions, but still. So I'm saying, like, nothing can jump out at you necessarily. But like most things, the devil is in the details. And that's why it's like, it's always fun to kind of watch the game first. And then you go kind of dig into the stats and say, okay, well, what do the stats also say? And then you kind of start to piece this puzzle together. Not all games are super straightforward where it's like, okay, this guy, Bo Nix threw for 310 yards and 4 touchdowns and was 25 for 34. And, like that's a clean game, simple game, put up points. It's very obvious to see how good of a game that is. And a game like this that's a little bit more muddled, you don't even realize actually how great it was. So I just wanted to highlight that here. But those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think about the Denver Broncos over the Raiders, 29-19? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment, so whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get in some discussions. Let's get in some fights. But ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here, and I'd absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to, something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're on our way to doing it. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help with the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next time.